We're back with another week of football, and DraftKings Sportsbook is keeping us in on the NFL action with great offers every single game day. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Throw $5 down on any of this week's epic matchups and walk away an instant winner. And DraftKings isn't stopping there. All customers can take advantage of 2 new offers every single game day this September. Football's more fun when you're in on the action. So download the app now and sign up with code HOOPS. New customers can bet just $5 to get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Only on the DraftKings Sportsbook app, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, with code HOOPS. That's HOOPS. The crown is yours. All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Tuesday, everybody. I hope all of you guys are having a great week so far. We are live on AMP, so if you're watching on YouTube or listening on our podcast feeds, don't forget that AMP is the very first place that you guys can get these shows. Continuing our power rankings today with number 10, the Oklahoma City Thunder, who are very interesting on their own accord before we even get to the fact that Chet Holmgren's coming back this year. And just so you guys know, over the weekend, we are now less than a month away from the kickoff of, or I should say the tip-off of the NBA season. We are, today is September 26th, and October 24th is our season opener. The Denver Nuggets and the Los Angeles Lakers will get things kicked off. So I'm starting to get super excited for that, but we're going to talk OKC today, a good long season preview on them, and then I've got 3 or 4 mailbag questions for the end of the show as well. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Don't forget about following me on Twitter at _JasonLT and our podcast feed, wherever you get your podcast under Hoops Tonight. And I need mailbag questions. We're going to continue to do those at the end of these shows in perpetuity, so don't forget to drop mailbag questions in the YouTube comments. All right, let's talk some basketball. So, quick little offseason recap. Not much roster turnover for the Thunder. They did lose Dario Saric to the Warriors in free agency. He was basically their backup 5 last year. They did get Davis Bertans in a trade. He shot 58% in effective field goal percentage on catch and shoot jump shots last year, 65% when he was unguarded. In general, was deadly in spot up situations, 1.44 points per possession, which is like off the charts good, but he barely played, only 11 minutes per game last year in 45 games, only logged 82 spot up possessions. My guess is that he probably won't play much. We'll see. But it's very possible that he ends up getting moved at some point. I'm curious to see what they decide to do to him, but technically he's on the Thunder's roster right now. Vasilije, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering the pronunciation there, but Vasilije Micic signs for 3 years and $24 million, played overseas last year and was amazing. He's a big guard. He's about 6'5", moves pretty well laterally. He's not a great vertical athlete, but he moves pretty well laterally. He's got a good quick first step. He was 1.21 points per possession in pick and roll last year. Just a ridiculously deadly pull-up 3, particularly from 3, but he can do it from everywhere on the floor. But he just, whenever he sees a spot, when a dude ducks under a pick or gets caught on a pick, he can rise and fire out to 25, 26 feet and hit it pretty consistently. He was 53.4% in effective field goal percentage on pull-up jump shots overall last year. And most importantly, when he gets downhill and pick and roll, he's got a gift for engaging the screen defender, baiting them to come further out because of his willingness to shoot not just the 3, but also pull up jump shots in the mid-range and floaters and things along those lines. He could pull the screen defender out, which then unlocks his best skill, which is his passing ability. He was an excellent passer in pick and roll last year, great at making the skip pass to the weak side corner, hitting the roll man. He's just a super skilled shot creator, and I think he's going to be an interesting addition off the bench for OKC. He was 41% on all jump shots overall, 58% weighted for 3s, and 62% at the rim, which is excellent for a guard. I just look at him as basically like a shorter version of Josh Giddey, who's a better jump shooter, is kind of the way that I'd look at it. But I think he's going to be an interesting guy to come off the bench and continue to be the next in a long line of skilled shot creators on this OKC team. They also drafted Cason Wallace out of Kentucky, big guard, 6'2", strong, long arms. I think he's got about a 6'8" wingspan. Good athlete with real downhill power. When he starts attacking the rim, he can actually get by people pretty easily. Good shooter as well, 54% effective field goal percentage on catch and shoot jump shots, 47% on pull-up jump shots. And he has the potential to be an excellent defender. I'm not as high on him as everyone else. I think he really struggles with screen navigation right now, but I think it's mostly an effort thing. When I watch him, he just kind of seems willing to die into screens or get into a trailing position. I think he's got the athletic tools and the strength to be an excellent screen navigator. So I think in the long run, he could be a really interesting option there. But this is a team that's deep at guard, so I'm not sure he's going to play much to start. But again, in this particular situation with the Thunder, they're just stacking assets, stacking young, talented basketball players so they could pick the ones that actually make sense with them in their long-term vision and trade the ones that aren't a fit into that vision for potentially the veteran star that could come into the picture, right? Because as we look at this roster, it's all kids in their 20s, right? You're guys like Victor Oladipo who are on the roster. I mean, I doubt he ever actually plays for the Thunder, that he's not going to be a veteran presence necessarily, right? So it's like you're not. This is a young team, and so in the long run, having all these assets could be the vehicle with which you get veteran presences that are needed, specifically a role player, because I don't think this team needs any more shot creation necessarily. But looking at the depth chart, at guard, they have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Trey Mann, Isaiah Joe, Micic, like we mentioned earlier, Kassan Wallace. At forward, Josh Giddey, Lou Dort, Jalen Williams, Kenrich Williams, Aaron Wiggins, and Jeremiah Robinson Earl. That's a pretty ridiculously deep core of forwards. And then bigs, Chet Holmgren, Alexei Pokusevski, Jalen Williams, and Ousmane Dieng. That's a lot of really good basketball players. And it's going to be really interesting to see how they kind of piece together the rotation. Starting lineup with Chet coming back should be Shai, Josh Giddey, Lou Dort, Jalen Williams, and Chet Holmgren. That's potentially a lineup that could be the best lineup in basketball within the next 5 years. That is a really, really exciting group of young players. So there's two different ways that I think that the Thunder are going to make a leap this year. Because obviously I have them very high. I have them up at 10th. So I'm saying that I believe the Thunder are a top 10 team in this league. And this is a team that was very firmly in the middle of the pack last year. So what am I saying is going to justify that leap? A couple of different things. Specifically, is this already is an existing group that is on the rise. Before we even get to Chet Holmgren, right? Like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a bona fide superstar. Josh Giddey is a serious weapon as a number 2. Not only did he average 17, 8, and 6 last year, but he had 31 points, 9 rebounds, and 10 assists in that play-in victory against the Pelicans. I watched that game in its entirety again this morning. He was awesome. And then Jalen Williams is coming off of a super impressive rookie campaign. I think he has the potential to be a better version of Jaylen Brown, who's got more of like a versatile shot creation package and a better passer. He's already a better passer than Jaylen Brown. So like I'm really excited about Jalen Williams in the long run as well. This is a team that can get so much better even just looking at that specific core. And then you throw in Chet, who specifically addresses some very specific weaknesses on this team, right? Like this is a team that did not protect the rim well last year. This is a team that did not rebound well last year. And so not only is Chet Holmgren another super exciting young player as like a fulcrum there, he's also specifically addressing a need. And as good as Jalen Williams was last year playing playing basically as their starting 5 for the second half of the season, like he struggled in pick and pop situations. He struggled as a role man. That's something I expect Chet to be good at right away. And so it's not just the exciting young group and the improved continuity and them getting better as all young players do year by year in their experience in the NBA. It's also adding a super talented young player that specifically addresses a need. And so I'm really, really excited to dive into that a little bit deeper on both ends of the floor. But I don't think people are even prepared for how good Chet Holmgren is going to be. I think he's gone under the radar a little bit, not just because he missed the year last year, but because of all the hype surrounding Victor Wembanyama. And like, don't get me wrong, Victor Wembanyama is a better prospect. He deserves to be. And in the long run, he should be a better player. But right now, Chet's actually significantly more polished from the perimeter, significantly more polished than Victor Wembanyama is. And so I think he's actually going to provide a lot of what Victor can right away, but be a much better perimeter player, which I think is going to be super exciting. But we'll talk about that more later. So let's get to the offensive end of the floor. So the Thunder primarily set up in 5-out spacing. And the reason why they're able to do that is they've got skilled big men, right? Like Jalen Williams and Alexei Pokusevski and Dario Saric last year were all capable, or at least willing to take 3-point shots, right? Some of them made them more than others, but they were willing to take those shots. And so that allowed them to set up in that 5-out spacing. This year, it's going to be the exact same kind of arrangement. You're just going to basically swap out Dario Saric for Chet Holmgren and then properly slot Jalen Williams where he should be, which is as a backup 5, right? But it's the same kind of setup. And the reason why 5-out spacing matters is it's just much harder rotations to make. So imagine a 4-out, 1-in spacing system. where in any sort of ISO situation, my big man's in the dunker spot. If I beat somebody off the dribble or I post up and try to make a move aggressively towards the basket, it's a really easy rotation for the rim protector to make, because he's basically just going to, let's say that his man is in the dunker spot, he's going to situate himself close enough that the ref won't call defensive 3 seconds, but close, but still be in the paint where he can help, right? Or even if that dunker stands, in the short corner, he can still have like 1 foot in the paint and just kind of step in and out. It's a really easy rotation for him to make at the rim. And then same thing for pick and roll. In a pick and roll situation, if you have a non-shooting 5, you can run no roller behind coverage, meaning like you can actually continue to back up into the paint and not have to worry about the roll man popping to the 3-point line where he can cause problems. You can drop back and handle the roll man and the ball handler coming towards you, right? So in a 5-out spacing system, you make that rotation infinitely harder, right? Because in pick and roll coverages now, you've got Jalen Williams, or in this case, Chet Holmgren, popping to the 3-point line. And now as the roll man, you have to account for the fact that he can score there. Now, Jalen Williams actually struggled in pick and pop situations last year, did not play super well there. Chet Holmgren is going to be much, much better there. So it's going to be an even bigger problem for defenses this season. But as the screen defender, you have to be prepared for, on the throwback pass to the popping big, you have to close out, which is a really difficult rotation to make, right? Or let's just say in any sort of ISO situation, if I've got a shooting 5, let's say, for instance, like a play that the Thunder run a lot. So a lot of times they'll have their big man started above the break at the top of the key. So let's say Chet Holmgren's there, right? And they'll do a back cut with SGA. So a lot of times they'll use SGA as like a decoy to set up a dribble handoff. So like SGA will like throw the entry pass to the top of the key to the big man and like fake like he's going to go for a dribble handoff, but then he'll just cut back door and he'll go through to the other side. And then they'll like flow into a dribble handoff out of the corner for like Jalen Williams or something like that, right? But let's say Shai gets by his man in the back cut and Chet throws the pass and hits Shai on the back cut towards the basket. Where's the rotation, right? In a excuse me, in a 4-out 1-in system, if you beat somebody on a back cut and the rim protector's there, it's an easy rotation, right? The rim protector's just waiting. Maybe you make the drop-off pass to the dunker spot, but we've seen a lot in the playoffs in particular, guys in the dunker spot, it's easy for them for the rim protector to recover, right? Like we'd see, Jared Allen sitting in the dunker spot and Mitchell Robinson be able to stunt up at Evan Mobley but still get back to contest Jared Allen. Or we'd see the Lakers, that would happen a lot with Jared Vanderbilt. Like he'd cut into the dunker spot and he'd catch there and the guy would be able to step up to help but then still recover back to Jared Vanderbilt. It's just an easier rotation to make, especially for an elite rim protector. But in a 5-out system, if SGA beats his man on the cut and, Chet Holmgren throws that bounce pass, that rotation's got to come all the way out of the weak side corner now. That's an extremely difficult rotation to make. So SGA's probably going to get a layup, right? And if he doesn't get a layup, it's you're in a 5-out spacing system, right? So even if he does rotate over and stop SGA from making the layup, he's going to have easy kickouts to shooters on the weak side. And so, and like literally, instead of a rim protector being able to step up to contain SGA and then stunt back to stop the dunker spot, he's not going to be able to contest that and then close all the way out to the weak side corner. So again, 5-out spacing requires you to have a skilled big man, a guy that's capable of knocking down shots. And not only that, but capable of making plays off the dribble. But if you can set up that way, it provides many, many more issues for the defense, right? And like we've seen 5-out lead to advantages even for teams that don't have shooting bigs, right? Like Golden State runs primarily a 5-out offense. And now again, we've seen elite defenses cause them problems by sagging and top locking, right? But for the most part, 5-out spacing is going to provide better opportunities for your perimeter players to get downhill. That just fundamentally is the best way that they to set up an offense in the modern NBA. And that's, kind of why I love this Oklahoma City Thunder team so much. Like they have one of my favorite young players in the league in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. They have one of my favorite young draft prospects in the league in Chet Holmgren. They've got all these other young players that are super fun and exciting to watch. They've got a coach, Mark Dagenal, who does a really nice job. But also they play a modern brand of basketball that I really, really like. Not just on the offensive end of the floor, but on the defensive end of the floor as well. But again, like that, when you combine that spacing setup with guys like Shai that can get downhill so well, with guys like Jalen Williams that can get downhill so well, with big guards like Josh Giddey that can punish players inside, like you end up scoring in the paint a ton. And they were 5th in restricted area makes per game in the entire NBA and 7th in overall points in the paint per game. So I think that was a positive fallout from their spacing setup. But everything starts with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Like, he's just a bona fide superstar. He was 4th in the league in scoring last year, averaged 31 points per game, 63% true shooting, which is just obnoxiously good. But most importantly, he excels at a brand of basketball that you need to reach the highest levels of the game of basketball, right? Like, SGA is not an analytics guru, like I'm going to take the most efficient shots and we're going to squeeze out the best point per possession rating and in all these situations and maximize regular season potency. He plays basketball in a way that succeeds in the NBA postseason. He does take shots that are not necessarily analytically sound, right? Like an SGA pull-up jump shot last year was only worth about 1.02 points per possession, right? Which seems low because he's taking a lot of pull-up twos. But the reality is like he can get to that shot whenever he needs to, even in a situation where things get super congested in the paint, where the refs start swallowing their whistles and letting go a lot of contact and fouling, right? Like his points per possession is resilient. It's postseason resilient. By thriving in the methodical half-court setting, he can be a great crunch time player and he can be a great playoff player. And I don't think it was a coincidence that in his first massively important elimination game as the solo star or as the main star on a team, obviously he had his reps in the past. I think he had that one playoff series with Chris Paul in the bubble, right? But like when you look specifically at his first real big, high stakes playoff game in the first round of the play-in tournament, he was incredible, and down the stretch of the game was creating high quality shots all over the floor, right? And ended up hitting basically the game winner, that crazy one leg fadeaway going along the left lane line, right? So like that's the exciting part, is it's not just that you have a superstar, you have a superstar whose game is specifically built to thrive in the NBA postseason. And that, to me, if you're a basketball fan and you're rooting for a team, that's like the one thing you absolutely have to have any chance to win. And SGA is that guy. And so that's your starting point. That's your primary entry point, right? Like that's the guy that can consistently get the defense into rotation. And from there, they're just a devastating drive and kick team because everybody on the floor knows how to cut, knows how to relocate off the ball, knows how to attack a closeout, knows how to attack the offensive glass. They're just an extremely difficult team to guard. It's funny because like watching the Thunder is a surreal experience because they're super young, right? They're this super young basketball team. All their core players are in their 20s. And yet when you watch them, it's like watching a veteran team. Even their even their younger players, guys like Jalen Williams and Josh Giddey, they play like veteran players. Like even Jalen Williams as a young big man in this league, like you watch him in a high stakes environment, and he just isn't going to do anything stupid. Like he's just going to play within his role and limit mistakes and do his job. And that's like a cultural thing from the top down in the roster. Like this is not the Houston Rockets from last year or the Detroit Pistons and some of these other young teams where it's like, it just feels like no one really knows how to play basketball at like a veteran level, right? Like this is a young team with the personality and execution and habits that you'd expect to see from a veteran team. And that's what makes them such a devastating half-court offense in these big, like slow down environments, right? Because like you're just SGA is either going to be able to call for a ball screen and get a blitz, which is going to open up a 4-on-3, and you're going to get some sort of wide open shot out of it, or in single coverage, he's capable of executing and getting to spots on the floor where he knows he can make shots at a high percentage. And it just makes them really, really difficult to guard. But they have tons of secondary shot creation. Obviously, Josh Giddey, as we mentioned earlier, the incredible 31, 9, and 10 in that first playing game against the Pelicans. Jalen Williams was up over a point per possession in all play types last year. Jalen Williams converted ISOs at 1.12 points per possession last year. There were 72 players in the NBA who logged at least 100 ISOs last year. Jalen Williams ranked 7th out of those 72 players with his 1.12 points per possession. Like, as far as young rookies go, he's one of the more exciting ones. And he's obviously going to experience significant leaps in the coming years. Now, the biggest weak point in the offense last year was their spot-up shooting. As good as their spacing principles were, they just had a lot of guys who struggled to make shots. Like Lou Dort, Jalen Williams, and Josh Giddey, and I'm talking about Jalen Williams, and Josh Giddey were all below a point per possession in spot-up situations last year. Even Shai, as good of a pull-up jump shooter as he is, he's not a good catch-and-shoot player. He was only 28% from the field on catch-and-shoot jump shots last year. As a team, the Thunder were 26th in spot-up efficiency, so they were bottom 5 in converting spot-up possessions last year. That was the big thing that held them back on the offensive end of the floor. Now, I think a couple of things will help here a lot with their spot-up shooting. One, continuity. You have guys like Josh Giddey, Jalen Williams, SGA. These are all guys that are accustomed to having the basketball in their hands a lot, right? And so I'm not surprised that guys like Jalen Williams and Josh Giddey struggled a little bit in spot-up situations because they're just not used to having to do that a lot on the basketball floor, right? So, and even SGA, like you give the ball to Josh Giddey or Jalen Williams and let them go to work. He's not used to having to take a lot of catch-and-shoot jump shots. So he only took 50 all season, right? So like at a certain point, like all three of them will get more and more comfortable playing with each other, understanding where their off-ball opportunities are and how to capitalize on them. So I think continuity will help because you got to think that's basically the first year that all three of those guys have played together, right? So I think that'll help a lot. And then the Chet Holmgren thing. He's just a massive upgrade on both ends of the floor. And it's just going to make things a lot easier. Like Jalen Williams, the center, he was really good in catch-and-shoot situations, in spot-up situations. But when he was picking and popping, he struggled to knock down shots. He was just 6 for 21 on the season, knocking down shots. He was good in the short roll. Like he would catch on those blitzes from SGA and he would make good reads to shooters, but he really struggled finishing at the basket. So like as good as Jalen Williams was in certain areas, he had some pretty glaring weaknesses. Like I expect Chet to thrive in those situations. I expect Chet to be a great pick and pop player. I expect Chet to be a really good short roll player as well. He's going to actually provide vertical spacing, a legit gravity in roll man possessions where he can actually roll to the rim and be a vertical spacer. That's not a thing that this team has had, and that's not a thing that SGA has been able to play with, right? And then he's also going to have the ability to capitalize on switches and things along those lines, which Jalen Williams couldn't do. So I think Chet's just going to be a much, much better player. And that's not an insult to Jalen Williams. He did his job. He filled in as a center with the injury, but like that's where he should be. He should be off the bench. He's a very good bench player to have on this particular team at the center position. But when you add in the improved spacing with Chet Holmgren, and not only that, but his improved playmaking in the short roll, I actually think you're just going to get higher quality spot-up reps. So when you factor in better spot-up opportunities and more continuity for the guys learning how to capitalize on them, I expect them to be a much, much better spot-up team next year. So, I mean, when you kind of put all that together, I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if OKC ended up being a top 10 offense next year. I predict them to finish in that 8 to 12 area, like right around the 10th best offense in the league.
For a limited time, you can save up to 40% off on an NFL Plus premium annual subscription when you sign up through Plus Play from Verizon. Plus Play. It is a platform where you can shop, manage, and save on the subscriptions you already love, like NFL Plus. With NFL Plus Premium, you get access to live games on mobile, NFL Red Zone, NFL Network, and more. So you can watch multiple games all at once on any screen around you for updates. Never miss a touchdown. That simple. And for fantasy players, NFL Plus Premium makes all the difference. Access to programming like Fantasy Live through the NFL Network, Red Zone for tracking player performances on a Sunday, access to live local and primetime games, access to Fantasy Plus. Just go to verizon.com/NFL to get NFL Plus Premium today. 40% off, that's 40% off an annual subscription, just $59.99 for the full season. Get it before it's gone.
Now, looking at the defensive end is actually a super interesting experience with this Thunder team because they were really good in some areas and really struggled in others, right? They finished 13th in defensive rating, which is confusing because they were an average paint defense. They were a bottom 10 3-point defense. They were the third worst defensive rebounding team in the league, and they fouled a ton. So, like, how did they manage a decent defensive rating, 13th in the league, despite being not great at any of those core areas? And it really just comes down to they never, ever turn the ball over, right? They're the fourth best team in the league at taking care of the ball. That prevents their defense from having to deal with those transition opportunities, right? Like, every time you turn the ball over, it's a high percentage possession going the other way. By taking care of the basketball, you prevent those opportunities, right? In fact, they allowed a transition possession on just 13.5% of their defensive possessions. That was the best in the entire league, according to Cleaning the Glass. So taking care of the basketball and avoiding those catastrophic defensive possessions where you're just giving away a two-on-one, 3-on-1, fast break dunk or wide open three, that helps a lot. And then the second part of it is they force a ton of turnovers. Opponents averaged 16.3 turnovers per 100 possessions against the Thunder, which was the second best mark in the NBA, second only to the Toronto Raptors. And that comes down to their aggressive point of attack defense. This is the strength of their defense, is the point of attack. Lou Dort is one of the very best perimeter defenders in the league. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a very impactful perimeter defender who is very disruptive. He's constantly reaching in with his long arms and getting deflections and knocking the ball away. He was actually 10th in the entire league in stocks last year, steals plus blocks, which is insane because that's a stat that's typically dominated by long athletic wings and rim protectors, right? But nope, SGA is right there in the mix because he's super disruptive at the point of attack. So think of it like this. If you force a ton of turnovers, meaning you cause, in this case, 16 and a half possessions a game where the other team doesn't even get a shot on the basket, and you keep them out of transition, you can be a good defense even when you struggle in other areas. And I think that's the perfect example of that. You finished 13th in defensive rating despite not protecting the paint well, despite not protecting the three-point line well, despite not rebounding well, and despite fouling a lot. And it's literally just goes to show you, like, you can target specific areas and be elite at specific things and cover for that. And them dominating the transition attack through forcing turnovers and taking care of the basketball allowed them to be a moderately successful defense. But again, like, Chet Holmgren is what makes this super, super exciting because you've got this elite point of attack defense, in my opinion, right? Like, between SGA and Lou Dort, you're going to be able to cause serious problems for perimeter players at the point of attack. But you've had no rim protection behind you, and you've never been able to end defensive possessions with a rebound. Like, here's how important rebounding is for this team. According to Cleaning the Glass, on half-court defensive possessions, in terms of actually forcing misses, the Thunder were the fourth best half-court defense in the league last year in terms of actually forcing misses. And we calculate that by points per play rather than points per possession. But they gave up an offensive rebound on 30% of those half-court possessions. So when you're giving them an extra chance 1 out of every 3 times, that's going to hurt your defense, and that's what ended up happening. So, again, like, they actually were a really good half-court defense. They just couldn't secure defensive rebounds, right? And so, like, when you look at that specific situation, that's where it gets exciting to add Chet Holmgren to the mix because this is a team that forces a ton of turnovers. This is a team that can be impactful at the point of attack. Now this is a team that can protect the rim. Now this is a team that can secure defensive rebounds. Chet Holmgren is that type of athlete at the center position. And that, I think, is going to push them way up in what their defensive potential could be. I actually think this team is going to finish right around 10th in defense as well. And again, if you're right around the 10th best offense and right around the 10th best defense in the league, you're going to win a lot of games. And I think this Thunder team is going to win a lot of games. I think they're going to win probably around 50 games, which is a lot in the Western Conference. I think they're going to have home court advantage in the first round of the playoffs. I think they're going to be a top 4 seed. And I think they're going to be a royal pain in the ass when they get there. And I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if they knocked out a team or two along the way. Don't be the least bit surprised if you see, kind of similar to what the Thunder did in 2011, Just start beating teams that you're not expecting them to beat. Like that is the type of potential that I think this team has. I'm super, super excited to watch them this year. They're only going to be on national TV 13 times, which I think is a mistake because not only do they have super exciting young players to watch, but they're just going to be good. They're going to be good. Like, of all of the things that we're going to see this year, one of the ones that I feel most confident about is that if the Thunder are healthy, they are going to be a top 4 seed in the West. I think this team is incredibly talented. I think they're led by the right kind of star. They are adding a very specific player that addresses all of their weaknesses, and they've got young players that are going to take leaps. Watch out for the Thunder this year, man. I think they're going to be incredibly good. All right, let's move forward to the mailbag. So, first mailbag question. How much does being involved in an injury change how you play? Things that come to mind is charge setting, blindside screens, undercutting on closeouts, midair contests. Thinking about the player that made the impact on Nick Chubb, I'm sure there is some internal warfare anytime a player performs those things on a court after they were involved in an injury. Do players continue to close out as hard, set as many screens, take as many charges, etc.? So good question. I can only speak from my personal experience. But I had a broken foot my sophomore year of college, and it happened during the offseason, and I was still recovering from it when I came into the season. And the big thing that stood out to me personally was not trusting planting hard or exploding on it. Like, when you see, it's funny, as a basketball player, you see these opportunities arise, right? Like you'll be working on a closeout or working in pick and roll, and you'll see an opportunity, like a lane will open up. And if you're an athlete, you'll think like, oh, I can shoot that gap. And like, that was one of my strengths when I was playing, was like, I was a good athlete. I had good size and I could jump and I can move. I had a good quick first step. Right. So like if I saw an opening, I'd shoot that gap. Right. And that is an example of a play that requires when you really like try to hit the jet, so to speak, into those tight space environments, you have to trust that you can explode. Meaning like you have to plant hard. Let's say I need to do a left-right takeoff. So I need to plant my left foot hard, swing that right foot around and plant it hard and elevate off the ground. And like, I didn't trust my foot. And that was the main issue, is like, I just was very passive and tentative. And it wasn't even just in those specific situations attacking the like any sort of lane that would open up. It would also be in rebounding situations, like a highly contested rebound where I know I need to elevate in traffic. Like maybe I don't jump for it, right? Or a tougher defensive rotation or something along those lines. Like there was a trust phase that was after the recovery phase. And that's what I remember, is like, it was like I got hurt. I rested, walked around in a walking boot for 2 months. And then when I got to campus, I started to rehab and get back into shape. And like, then there was like this phase where I was more or less back, but I wasn't playing well. And it's funny because in this particular season that I'm referencing, in non-conference play at the start of the season, I really struggled. And at one point I actually got pulled out of the starting lineup for 2 games to like teach me a lesson, so to speak, about not competing enough on the offensive glass, or on the glass in general as a rebounder. By the way, my coach was right to do that. I was not rebounding well at the time. But then like right around the end of that semester, going into the spring, like something clicked and suddenly I trusted myself again, and to really plant that foot hard. And then I was able to make those explosive moves again. And then suddenly like I rebounded really well. I was, I think, 3rd in my conference in rebounding that during conference play, and ended up making an all-conference team. I played much better in the springtime. And it was because like I regained that trust in my athleticism. And like, it's funny because that's like in general what it's like aging with the game is, and I'm not that old, I'm only 32, but like as a 32-year-old playing now, I'm still not quite the athlete I was when I was in college, but I'm still a good athlete, but like I'm just super picky about it. But it's not even about not trusting my body, it's about just not wanting to take the risk. And it's more like, as a 32-year-old whose profession is not basketball, like my profession, or I shouldn't say basketball, but not playing basketball, right? Like my profession is outside of that, and I have other passions, right? Like I love to be active with my wife, and we love to travel, and I love to ski. I'm getting ready to go into ski season, right? So like I have these other priorities, and so like a serious injury is not something I'm interested in messing around with, right? So I won't push it, so to speak. to the same extent that I used to. Like most recently on Sunday, I played in a game, or on Saturday, I played in a game with a group of players that I play with. That we scrimmage club teams and JUCOs around the state of Arizona. It's just like a way that I just find higher level competition every once in a while coming out of Tucson. And I was playing on Saturday, and my Achilles was causing me some like significant soreness, and I started to feel some soreness on Thursday. And like I don't want to risk that. Like it's just not worth it to me. So I literally skipped my game yesterday for my men's league, and like I'm not going to play today, and I'm not going to play tomorrow. I'm going to take some time off because it's just not worth it for me at this phase in my life to push through, and I'm not trying to play professionally or anything, right? And so that same ideology stems into everything. Like I won't put my body on the line as much as I used to. And that's the thing. When you're younger, you feel invincible and you do put your body on the line all the time. But I think everybody kind of goes through a phase in their 30s where they just kind of start to be more picky about it. But as far as injuries go, I think that's like the big thing I learned from that broken foot, and is just like there's phases. There's the healing process. There's like the rehab and reconditioning process. Then there's like the mental process. It's getting over the mental hurdles that you build over the course of that injury. All right, next mailbag question. If you had the power of the NBA commissioner, what would you change would you change anything specific in the NBA? So I put 3 things down just as quick ideas. I shortened the season to 66 games. I've talked about this before, but like whatever gate revenue you lose by losing 20% of the games, I think in the long run you would make up through improved urgency, improved star performance. Those two, participation, I should say. By having your stars play in way more of the games, by having each of those games matter 20% more, in the long run, I think you'd recoup that lost revenue. The league will never do it, but that's what I would do. Secondly, I'd change the way the game is officiated. I think there's an obsession with trying to avoid the overly ugly, physical rock fight games of the late 90s and early 2000s. That's kind of like the direction the league went, right, with the way they were officiating, is trying to avoid that. But I don't think that would happen if you changed the way the game was officiated. And by the way, when I say that, I mean like basically give the benefit of the doubt to the defender is what I would do. I would make it so that like if a dude does some janky non-basketball move and tries to draw a foul, don't give it to him. If a guy flops, don't give it to him. If a guy is maybe fouled on a jump shot, like don't call it unless you're 100% certain. Like just, I would be way, way, way more deferential to the defense with officiating. And I don't think it would ruin the product because the spacing in general is so much better and the overall skill level on the floor is so much better. I think it would just look like playoff basketball in the regular season, which is a very, very entertaining television product. So I would change the way the game is officiating more in favor of the defense. And lastly, I would change the salary cap rules to protect teams that draft well. So I think it's ridiculous if you're a team like Oklahoma City, for instance, and you draft all these guys and it comes time to pay them and you can't because of the salary cap. And then you end up having to pick and choose which guys you want to actually retain, right? Like, to me, that doesn't make any sense. Like the Orlando Magic could run into this problem soon. Like, what if you need to pay everybody and then all of a sudden you have to let Markelle Fultz go? Like that's not fair in my opinion. And so the way that I'd structure it is like, because every team has a combination of both, right? Like the Magic have Markelle Fultz, who they obtained in a trade, but then they have Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero that they got through the draft, right? So like, at what point do you kind of like change the rules based on how you obtain the player? And that's what I would do, is I'd make it so that if you are paying salary tax penalties, I'd structure the entire process so that you only pay those penalties on players obtained through free agency and trades. Because at the very least, you should have the ability to sign or extend a homegrown player that you've obtained through the draft to a long-term deal and not have to worry about paying absurd luxury tax penalties just because your scouting department is better than the team down the road. I don't think that's fair, especially when you look at the realities of first-round draft picks and how many of them actually pan out, and the answer is pretty small. And so, like, if you do strike gold 3 times, like, that sucks that you might have to lose a player as a result of that. So that's something that I'd like to see them address as well. 2 more. A lot of people say that Kyrie Irving is the most skilled player in the NBA. What do you say to this? I tend to disagree because I think Steph Curry is the most skilled player in the league. Kyrie might have the best handle, but there have been other ball handlers at least comparable to him in history. However, no one can even touch Curry in terms of volume, pull-up three-point shooting. Plus, he might have a top 3 handle in the league. Thoughts? Good question. I've talked about this before, so I'll just give like a really short version of it. But to me, it's like separating the skill set from the realities of what makes a good basketball player. So if you include things like the willingness and ability to play off the ball, conditioning, competitiveness on defense, defensive instincts, things like that as skills, so to speak, then yeah, I think Steph is a more skilled player than Kyrie. But if I simplify skill down to strictly shooting touch from every spot on the floor, including at the rim and off jump shots, footwork in and out of specific moves and counter moves, and the handle to make all those moves and counter moves. If I oversimplify the game to just that, like I remove passing, off-ball play, every other thing out of the equation, then I do think Kyrie's combination of shooting touch, footwork, rim finishing, sheer arsenal of moves and counter moves is the best in the NBA, maybe ever. Like that's how much I think Kyrie has that stuff polished out. But like it's just a silly conversation in my opinion because Steph is just a much, much better basketball player. He is willing to work off the ball and does so at an extremely high level that helps him generate easier offense, right? His willingness to work off the ball makes him less repetitive. So like Kyrie Irving is going to attack in very similar ways often. And if you are guarding him with a live dribble from the perimeter every single time, like you're just going to kind of figure out how to get in front of some of his moves, right? But like Steph is going to always be moving off the ball. And if he does go to pick and roll, it's going to be at the end of the game when he needs to, and it's going to catch you off guard and you're not going to be ready for those moves. And I think that's a big part of why he's so successful when he gets later into the postseason, right? And then Steph is also a better defender, a better rebounder, a better leader. He's just a better basketball player. And so, like, yeah, when we say, like, who's the most skilled player of all time, it all depends on how you define skill. And yes, if we narrow down skill specifically to ball handling, shooting, footwork, then, yeah, I would say that Kyrie is the most skilled player in the NBA. But he's not close as a basketball player to Steph. He's a far better player on both ends of the floor, including on the offensive end, and that's why he's won so much in his career. I don't think that's a coincidence. All right, last question. What do you think will happen with Dame? Doesn't seem like Portland is interested in trading him into Miami. So the latest intel is that Toronto's getting in on the equation, and I don't want to say it's off the table because, one, I'm not a super connected guy. It's not something I'm really interested in. I'm more of an analyst, right? I'm not, constantly having phone conversations with GMs and trying to get behind the scenes intel, right? So like, I can't speak to the personalities involved, right? And here's the reality: if Portland is vindictive enough to send Miami away from Miami, or send Dame somewhere other than Miami, and if Toronto is as aggressive as they were during the Kawhi situation, then yeah, like Dame might end up being a Toronto Raptor. But two things. One, I don't understand why Toronto would even do that. Like, how good is Toronto really? Like, I didn't even have them in my top 20 teams this year. They have arguably the worst backcourt in the NBA. Like, if I slot Dame into the starting lineup, even in a vacuum, like, let's just pretend Toronto doesn't even have to send players back. Like, is Dame, OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam, Scotty Barnes, and Jakob Poeltl, are they winning the championship? Like, I don't think so. Like, I think they instantly become like a fringe contender, but they're not winning the championship. It's not like the Raptors in 2018 who were, if I remember correctly, they won 59 games or something like that and were the number 1 seed in the East and like were just flat out like literally just a better version of DeMar DeRozan away from being a championship team. And so, yeah, they swapped Danny Green and DeMar DeRozan out and swapped DeMar DeRozan out, right, in the deal. They had Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green, and suddenly, like, they are the best team in the league and demonstrate that on the court, right? But, like, that team actually made a lot more sense in terms of how close they were, how wide open the league was at that point. Obviously, with when you get to the postseason. Well, I guess technically that's not true because the Warriors were still put together. I guess that's a good point. Like the Raptors were technically taking an even bigger risk when you factor in how dangerous the Warriors were at that point. But I do think in general, taking a 59-win team and swapping a superstar or a star like in DeMar DeRozan for a superstar in Kawhi Leonard is just a much more straightforward process than we're maybe not even a playoff team. and we'd have to give up one of our core players to get Dame anyway. Like, let's say you just give up OG Anunoby, which is the structure of the deal, that the only structure of the deal that makes any sense for the Raptors. Let's say you just give away OG Anunoby. Is Damian Lillard and Gary Trent Jr. with Pascal Siakam, Scotty Barnes, and Jakob Poeltl winning the title? I don't think so. So, like, I don't really understand that specific rumor. I continue to think, like I've thought all summer, that Portland cannot do this to Dame. I do believe they owe it to him to send him to Miami. I know so many of you guys disagree with me, and we don't need to get into that again today. But, like, I do believe that they're eventually going to send him to Miami, and this is all just a leverage campaign to get the most possible return, which I'm totally okay with, even as ugly as it all looks in the big picture, right? So my guess is, today's Tuesday. My guess is that we end up having this trade before Sunday because of media day on that following Monday, and teams wanting to kind of have their rosters set going into training camp. So my guess is this ends pretty soon, and my guess is this ends with him in Miami, but of course it's on the table that he ends up in Toronto or somewhere else. All right, guys, that is all I have for today. As always, I sincerely appreciate you guys for supporting the show. We will be back tomorrow with number 9.